This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups. And once again, I am breaking new ground. I have found another country on the globe that we have never had a guest from, but I'm excited to introduce you to Andreas Flodström. Andreas, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Thank you very much for having me.
So he actually told me how to pronounce his name, and then my brain, got tangled up and with my American accent. So he's graciously going to allow me to butcher his name but I'll try to just say Andreas from here on out. But if you and I met at a networking event, Andreas, how would you introduce yourself to me?
So I would probably introduce myself as an entrepreneur. I would introduce myself as Swedish. However, I would quickly tell that I've been living most of my last 11 years in Ukraine, and that's also where I sort of started to build our business from. An engineer, I would probably not tell that, but that's a fact. Person generally excited about life, excited about the challenges and the opportunities of this world. So,
and a serial entrepreneur, obviously.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I kind of started many small failed ventures during my study years, and then I started Beetroot, which is the current activity, 11 years ago, and that's been going since. So basically that was sort of it was actually my master thesis from my university, and it just continued going. Yep.
So was that like just like the equivalent of maybe an MBA, or was it a entrepreneurial master's, or what was the course?
Yes, so I studied engineering, and then we had a master called Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship, a great master program, where the idea is actually that you should sort of take some innovation from academy and commercialize it. That's not exactly what we did, but at least we set up a technology company during the student years, and me and my co-founder Gustav, we essentially moved to Ukraine from Sweden while I was still in that master program.
Now, the Chalmers Institute has a history or I guess a reputation of like social entrepreneurship as well. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's also sort of, I mean, for me, starting the business, we even before knowing exactly what we would do, we knew that we wanted to go somewhere to Eastern Europe, and we wanted to set up a business that had a social positive impact. That was sort of the core criteria. And then we kind of started to go through what could we do, where can our impact be, and so on. So it was maybe not the typical starting point in that sense, but
right. So what was the driver? What was, nobody just wakes up one day and says, you know what, I'm leaving Sweden, I'm just going to move to Ukraine and we're just going to start this. So what were kind of the steps that I guess led to this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's a combination of factors. Of course, Sweden is fantastic in many different ways, but being 24 years old as I was at the time, and had been starting to travel in Eastern Europe, I found it super, super exciting and just like a place of opportunities and so on. So I guess a fair amount of adventureness in somewhere, and also sort of a feeling that, hey, this is somewhere we can make a difference here in some way. We don't know exactly how, but we have a good gut feeling about it. And so we kind of started traveling around through all the different countries of the region and got kind of hooked by Ukraine. And we felt that, wow, these people have something, like there is some special drive, there is some certain openness, and we kind of just felt really, really welcome. And so from the very start, I mean, we were in the master, I was in the master. We said, okay, we're going to try this for a year. We didn't really know what we were doing from the beginning. And, eventually just we kept started from this very, very low key. Like we were basically living on office floor from one student scholarship. So when you study in Sweden, you get some scholarships. So that was our starting funds of the business. And yeah, so we were traveling around in this like old Soviet car. And so it was very much an adventure that eventually turned into something, I think, more important.
I love that. You're in an old Soviet car, and you use the word adventure. I mean, that truly, you painted the picture for us that, just say two guys sleeping on an office floor, driving a car that probably breaks down about every 100 miles or 100 kilometers. You gotta do something else to it.
We probably spent more time in the car workshop the first year than in front of our computers. But we also traveled, on these Soviet trains, and there was like, I mean, there was just, we were, we had a lot of fun. Like, let's put it that way.
That is those are the kind of things that stories are built on. The histories of companies are built on. That's what the whole idea of, some of the greatest companies in the world were started in a garage. So you even have your own garage story. But what was the idea behind Beetroot? You kind of mentioned it was like your master's thesis, but was it? I mean, I'm sure it's pivoted since then, in some degrees. But what was the basic idea?
But basically, it's just evolved, I think. So the idea was, I mean, okay. So from the beginning, it's like we called it a field study in social entrepreneurship. We didn't even know what we were doing, but then we were evaluating a bunch of different ideas, and we kind of started to think like, okay, let's dig from where we are and from where we can see a direct impact here and now. And that was essentially, to put it simple, we found some great people, great engineers back in Ukraine, and we had this network of startups back in Sweden who needed that. And so it's very simple from the beginning, like starting to sort of experiment from where we were standing, but then sort of gradually evolving this to a more sort of sophisticated tech ecosystem for impact. But the basic idea is sort of, I mean, collect good people, do good things together, and build it like very much on the culture. So sort of attracting people who are attracted by mission of impact. So in a way, I mean, so our ecosystem nowadays have a couple of different legs. The main, like the biggest leg in terms of business as of today is sort of the tech consultancy. So we help impact-oriented companies from all over the world. Well, I mean, at least from 25 countries in the world, with building software in climate tech, ed tech, e-health, and other industries. But sort of we try to make sustainability and impact sort of the uniting force of everything we do, from what type of clients we work to how we treat our people, how we work with the learning and development, how we make sure that we grow in sort of the regions where maybe tech is not so developed, and so on and so forth. So that's the one leg. And then the other huge impact leg is Beetroot Academy, where we essentially, again, to put it simple, I mean, we help people to build a successful career in tech. Also, that started low-key, one group of people, we're teaching it, we're building it in a mid-sized city, and it's grown to today. We are in Ukraine, we are teaching around 5% of all the new tech specialists. Wow. And for those who don't know, I mean, Ukraine is actually the leading, or maybe one of the leading at least, tech countries in Europe these days when it comes to the competency and so on. So we're like a major force there, and nowadays growing it to other countries in Europe. And we have this hope to soon launch, again, low-key, but we're like gradually moving towards the US market as well. And so that's the academy, the software service, that's already sort of two pieces of the ecosystem. Before the full-scale war in Ukraine, we used to have a tech hub as well. So we used to run this big tech hub in Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. And for those who follow the news, you would know that Mariupol is, I mean, barely there as a city anymore. It's been destroyed, unfortunately, just as our hub. But with the start of the war, first, luckily, we managed to get everyone out of there and so on. But we also started an aid fund where we sort of use our ecosystem to support various grassroots initiatives, including trying to make that sort of tech oriented. So it's sort of little bits and pieces, but the main things are like, we're helping impact oriented software companies with building their products. It could be mobile apps, it could be websites. in a way, we have many competitors out there in the world, but then I guess the sophistication is with also being able to teach people. Of course, we teach for the whole market, not just for ourselves. And yeah, sort of like really working hard with making impact as part of our not only like client base, but really like our mindset in everything we do, and so on and so forth.
I like the idea. You're almost feeding your own supply. You're training people to also to be able to place them, at the same time. So you mentioned primarily like ed tech and environmental tech. And so is it only in kind of socially looking enterprises, or would you place people virtually anywhere?
We wouldn't put it so. We wouldn't work on anything, obviously. We are avoiding certain industries for sure. And of course, I would like to say that we can pick our clients completely. Of course, we have our sort of favorite list of impact clients and so on. So, but essentially, no. I would say that essentially, if we don't feel that the company we are working or are supposed to work with has a positive impact in the world in some way, then it's probably not our client. But of course, there are many different angles of that, and we also work. I mentioned our 3 core industries, but in reality, we work with many different things. We work with automotive and self-driving cars, electric vehicles, like so fintech products. But then fintech can be, depending on what it is, it can be good or it could be evil.
Yeah.
And
sure.
so it's really it's more about, do we feel like deep inside that this is contributing to a better world or not?
Yeah.
If yes, then it's a Beetroot client. And that's also, we have to be honest with ourselves, because that's also how we attract people to ourselves.
And it's you're avoiding that conflict, with other clients that you would hire on. But I love the way you just described the fintech, because as I look at my retirement accounts, I'm thinking it is either good or evil, depending on whether it's going up or down. So
exactly.
That's a great way to describe it. From now on, I'm going to look at the market is evil today because my retirement account went down. So yes, I love that description. And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups.
Have you been wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to start? Well, now you can start a podcast in less than 24 hours. I'm David Ezel, and I'll walk you through all of the things that you need to get started today. Things like how to choose the right microphone, how to edit your audio, and how to find guests and build a pipeline of future guests. This course does a great job of keeping things high level while also diving into the things that keep most people from starting. Even better, if you use the code RISING at checkout, you'll get 20% off your purchase. But that's only if you use the code RISING at checkout. What are you waiting for? Start your podcast today.
What's the biggest hurdle that you would face, trying to promote Ukrainian, tech stars, around the world? Is there a pro or biased view of Eastern European, software engineers? Is it because of, COVID now we more of a global village and people are working asynchronously? What's the current, status or current state of the market globally?
Okay, that's many.
That's a lot of questions in one sentence there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's start with. We've been doing this for 11 years. First of all, we picked Ukraine because we compared it with other countries in the region, and we felt that this is the best place to be.
Yeah.
Both like sort of as a gut feeling and sort of a subjective thing, but also an objective sort of. We actually made analysis and felt that Ukraine is a powerhouse of brains and sort of the whole sort of people, so many talented people who focuses on that industry. 10 years ago, I didn't feel that Ukraine was, we had to explain a lot why, Ukrainian engineers were good. I think in the last 5 years, that really sort of exponentially took off, and Ukrainians and Eastern Europeans gained this sort of world reputation of being extremely talented, especially when it came to sort of the deep sort of engineering mindset and so on. I mean, to name the elephant in the room, having a full-scale war in our main location is a big challenge.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, I mean, when it started, we didn't really know anything. Like, will we survive? I mean, we had, contingency plans, but nobody really, like, sort of, you don't really, even if you make plans for war, like it's sort of nothing what you would expect, and so on and so forth. So I mean, for the first days and weeks, it was more like, will we survive? I mean, not as a company, but physically, like, will we be able to get everyone out of various territories that are bombed and so on? But then we really, of course, I mean, first days I didn't even think about the company, and then after some days you're like, okay, maybe we actually can use the fact that we are here and do something important with it. So we also started actually an aid fund in the very early days of the war. And we also realized quite quickly that, I mean, people are so resilient, and sort of the fact that you can go to your work, earn your money, support your army, your family and friends and so on, it actually becomes even more important in the situation of war. And then sort of we learned through this 1.5 year how to operate in this environment, like, how to act when the air alarm goes off, when the electricity goes off, you have the generators and the Starlinks up and running. So sort of, I would say that right now we don't have any issues operationally, any major issues operationally in relation to the war. But of course, it is harder to sell to the world. That's like, yeah, we have a full-scale war where we deliver from, but everything's good. And the truth is that, I mean, we have had extremely loyal clients, many of them growing with us, and we even like managed to grow a little bit in total over this period. But of course, it's a different environment, and also, I mean, as many others, I think we feel a little bit of the global. I mean, I wouldn't even I would call it sort of a rebalancing, because we had the COVID years when sort of things were just like,
right,
I don't know what to call it, on anabola, like in some just like boosted to the max, and now as things are sort of resettling a little bit. And then you have, of course, like, I mean, anyone in our industries, we are looking at the trends, like, what can we do in AI? Like, we have some really cool experience, but then you look at it like, how can we implement it in our learning management platform in the academy? So we have all of the, I mean, of course, same challenges, and then, but of course, in a way, like, even though nowadays we have offices in Poland and in Bulgaria and spread, but still like 2/3 of our people are in Ukraine, and that's our daily reality. I mean, I spend at least 1 hour per day reading news and sort of just following what's happening. And to some extent, the work that we're doing, even when we're building, climate tech software for someone, to some extent, I mean, everything we're doing is also related to sort of Ukrainian resilience and being able to continue function as an independent, free country,
and individuals as well. I mean, there's got to be, I mean, you mentioned it a minute ago, there's got to be, it's almost like adding a little bit of normalcy back to them in the midst of chaos, so what is your, I mean, because you have such a kind of an insider's view, what is your take? What's it going to look like long term, do you think?
Wow. I mean, I think so from a Ukrainian perspective, and this is, I mean, of course, very much about Ukraine, there is really only one way forward, and that's for Ukraine to become fully free, free territory of the occupation from Russia. And that's really the mindset. Like, I don't see any sort of diverging from that. I hear a lot of Western leaders talking about this negotiation, that, and so on, to make a deal with. But really, like, I think Ukrainians have fought for hundreds of years and sort of really have just, we made up our mind. This is what we want. This is not what we don't want. And we're gonna, I mean, unfortunately, at a very high cost of human suffering and everything. But but it's just, but I mean, if to connect it a little bit, I think that, again, I mean, we came as an impact-oriented company, and we did not in any way expect that we would end up, living or being in this like war zone, essentially. But the fact that we have had this impact ID from start has made us also more resilient, I think, because we gathered people who had this, maybe slightly even idealistic view on many things. And then also the way we structure the company and the culture, that we try to be very decentralized in decision making. So even though we're like 500 people, so mid-sized company, we have a lot of decision making within different units. And when the war started, I was like, okay, this is like, I don't know how this works, but I know that there is a lot of decisions that have to be made. So it was just like, told our team that, okay, use whatever company funds you need to, if you need it for people's safety or whatever. And so basically like thousands of decisions being taken. And also I would say that the whole tech industry and the growth of that has had and has a really important factor in the mindset, because it's essentially, it's a way to, if to take Ukrainian economy, let's say before the war, or like, I mean, you had the old industries, you had a generally sort of partly dysfunctional economy with challenges, their corruption and so on. And then you have this tech industry where you sort of, if you're talented, you just connect to the global economy and you can live in a Western living standard in Ukraine. And that changes not only from a financial perspective, but it changes the mindset when you have this connection to the whole world.
No doubt about it.
So, I mean, I would, and if you go out, I mean, if you go out in a village, I was in a village in Ukraine last week. If you go out in a village and ask a grandma in the village, like, what do you think your kids should do? And they would tell you, think they should go to tech, because that's apparently where all the opportunities are. So that sort of became a thing. And also how...
It's in their DNA.
Yeah, exactly. And the sort of how the government has also changed. I mean, it's no secret, Ukraine still has a lot of problems, right? A lot of corruption, for example. But by transforming it with digital tools, for example, having all your government services in one app, much more comfortable in Ukraine than I have it in Sweden. That just cuts out the whole sort of issue of corruption in many aspects. And of course, I mean, again, sad as it is, but of course the war also triggers all of this. I mean, it sort of how to mobilize the whole society. And of course it's important to have strong tech specialists in war, because there's a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of digital warfare, and there is drones, and there is like, so I mean, again, as sad as it is, but yeah, I just remain a strong believer in Ukraine, of course. There is no, I mean, the more I spend time in this country with these people, and the more I see how Ukrainians are able to stand up towards, I mean, the worst of challenges, I'm more and more convinced that Ukraine is going to be successful. It's going to be free. It's going to be good, but of course it comes at a tremendous cost. So
right. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I appreciate you kind of delving into a difficult subject there. But you mentioned a second ago, you said 500. Is that 500 Beetroot staff? What's that 500 number, and what does it look like? Describe that number and what those roles are and where they are.
So that would be
not granularly, but just kind of in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be around 400 people, like 400 engineers who work with different clients throughout the world. And then
so these are placements.
Yeah, it's like full-time engagement in various scale-ups, enterprise. It's quite broad, but those are the ones who sort of work with this climate tech or ed tech or e-health companies. So that's around 400 people. And then, of course, I mean, we have a lot of, we have admin, legal, HR, sustainability. Like, we have different like sort of functions in Beetroot, the tech company. And then you have Beetroot Academy, which is actually a separate legal entity, but functioning in the same ecosystem. And in Beetroot Academy, we would be around 50 full-time staff.
Wow.
Anything from, I mean, it's like 10 people constantly working with developing our product, our course materials. Then you have people working with the teachers because it's sort of a boot camp style. And then you have, on top of that, you have around 150 teachers who are part-time. So I guess when I
is
say
that all
500
virtual,
plus,
or is that on site, or is both? Some combination.
oh, it's virtual. Nowadays it's virtual. So before COVID, we had 19 Beetroot academies, like physical centers. People would go there and sit, and the teacher would be there and so on, which was amazing for building a community and so on. But then COVID sort of forced us to go full online. I was skeptical, but I was proven wrong. For some time, we were running offline and online in parallel. And it turned out that we are actually better in teaching online. But it's online on our platform, but still sort of partly teacher-led. So it's a flipped classroom model where you have some material, like we constantly produce new materials. I mean, this is like fresh knowledge, right? So, I mean, for example, right now we've been spending the whole summer pushing out new AI modules and stuff like that. So we have this team who constantly push out new materials used in the courses. But then you are also in a group of like 15 people, and you have a teacher or a mentor who supports you in the process. And that would be, basically virtual teachers. And again, nowadays, it's not only Ukraine, but we had, like, let's say last year, we had like almost 4,000 students, say 3,500 was in Ukraine and 500 outside. So that's sort of, and that amount is growing. And really like because what I mean, I know a lot of these people personally, right? And I can see the difference we can make in someone's life from, you have this sort of, I don't know, job where you're stuck and you cannot really earn a good living and so on. And then we managed within 4 months to sort of turn you into a completely different reality. Of course, it's with your own hard work put in there. We can only, give you the tools, but then you see the change that makes. And I'm thinking like, wow, if we can do that, I mean, we already did it tens of thousands of times, but if we can do that hundreds of thousands or millions of thousands throughout the world, because again, like the tech market is global, and the amount of impact giving that skill set gives can differ a little bit from different regions, but essentially it's like huge. Even, I mean, again, financial is just one, but just as an illustration, in Ukraine, the average salary in tech would be around 5 times the average salary in the country. And that means that the average salary in the country is very low. Yeah. But the average salary in tech this is a decent living. Like you're a global citizen. You can do what you want. By
Western standards, it may be still, lower than, say, Western Europe.
Of course, it's still, I mean, of course, there is a factor of it's interesting because it's cheaper, I don't like the word, but so it's less expensive, but the living standard you would get from that money locally is actually higher than you get as a, I don't know, senior software developer in Silicon Valley or in Stockholm or whatever.
The real impact of the salary is actually better probably in that.
Exactly. Yes. And that's sort of this.
No wonder you went to Ukraine. You got tired of paying those high taxes.
But I mean, of course, then we also, I mean, in the academy, of course, what we teach is technical skills, but then we try to put in this sort of mindset again of sustainability and impact, because if you suddenly earn 5 times more than the average in your country, suddenly it's not only about you making a class journey, it's also about you taking responsibility in your society, right? You have, and I think, again, like, I mean, this community of graduates we have in Beetroot Academy, it's hard to follow everything, but we follow like all the different initiatives, even related to Ukrainian resilience now in the war. It's just mind-blowing. Like there are so many things going on, and that's what happened when people have this, you have the self-esteem app you showed, I can compete in a global work market and so on. So that's basically, I mean, and talking a lot about that now, but I'm like, that's really my one of my most important drivers, I think.
And that's certainly what gets you out of bed in the morning and drives you. Even you look back over the last 12 years or so, the difficult times. I mean, you still, your mission was what was driving you to to continue to get up every and sleep on that office floor, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But it is. I have a little bit of a theory that I think business owners can be just created, but entrepreneurs are actually born that way. I think there's like a genetic disposition in people that have that genetic driver in them. And I mean, I think you're a perfect example because look back at your life. Have you ever been employed or employable? It's like I have. I started at 18, and I've always started things.
I actually realized a while ago that I've interviewed like thousands of people for jobs in Beetroot, but I've never been on a job interview myself. Like I've never been on the other side. I'm like, really, like maybe I should just go on some interviews to sort of see how it's like. But it's, yeah.
You've only seen half the picture. That's exactly right. You don't know what they go through. There you go.
Exactly.
I love that. The model though with Beetroot is, are they virtually Beetroot employees that you're contracting out, or are you placing them as employees of other companies, or is it kind of a mix of both?
No, they're directly connected to Beetroot, so they're full-time Beetroot contracted in different ways and forms, and then but essentially, like when we work long time with, and most of our clients are actually long time. That's one of the reasons why we've been able to keep stable and even growing a little bit through this crazy, because when you work like for years with the same people, that becomes also part of your team. So it's like we never really had this sort of like our team is like we build a Beetroot environment, an ecosystem where we give all the support we can possibly. But essentially, when you work together with a specific client, we also try to help that team, those developers, to become part of the client teams, if it's a long-term engagement. So, so mentally, I guess a little bit of both, actually.
That makes sense, and the way you describe that. And as we're kind of wrapping up today, I want to respect your time, but it's getting later in the day. But tell me, like one or two things that are just really like one-liners that you think, after you run this for 12 years, just lessons learned that you think would be germane to anyone that's wanting to lead a team, lead an enterprise. What would you like to have known when you started that now, that are just one or two really key nuggets of truth there?
Yeah. One-liners, that is. Well, okay. Well, it's more maybe a confirmation of something we made right. Maybe it wasn't right in some of our previous businesses we were into. But personally, I've been just reconfirmed again and again through this, quite challenging journey at times, that having a clear mission that is not you becoming a multimillionaire or whatever, like that's really what's going to drive you in the long term. Like building that community, building of people who want to go the same way as you, to want to change the same things in the world, who wants to. That's, at least, for me, that's I cannot, because I kept getting these questions sometimes, like, what? Not so much now, but before, like, so what's in it for you, and like, what's like sort of what the purpose, and it's like, and I'm like, well, how else would you do it? Like, if you don't have that strong mission, like it's no way you can pull through the most difficult of times and so on. So yeah, have a mission, build a culture around it, and find those sort of key keepers in your team who's like always with you on that mission. As easy as it sounds, I think those are the main things. And maybe one small thing, you don't have to be the smartest in the room. We started this business being 24 years old, not knowing the country we went to or the industry we started to work in. And we literally only had our drive and our mission. And then we united people smarter than us or better than us in various fields. And that's, for us, that's really the success factor.
And I think longevity. I mean, longevity, especially in the midst of the difficulties, recently in Ukraine with the last year and a half or so. But man, it is a great story to hear about. It's a great story to be able to follow as you continue to grow Beetroot. And is there anything that we haven't touched on? Just a closing thought that you think would be helpful to our audience, and maybe just tell people where the best place to find more about you online.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open for interaction. If you want to find me online, probably the easiest is LinkedIn. So that would be just my name, Andreas Flodström, Beetroot. Write us short notes, why you want to get in contact, and that would be the easiest. If you want to get in contact with Beetroot, it's beetroot.co for the tech consulting, or beetrootacademy.com for the academy. So happy to connect.
Well, I appreciate you taking time today. It's been great to hear the Beetroot story, and it's I just love the mission and vision behind it, and it's already getting my entrepreneurial wheels spinning and my networking wheels spinning, that there are people I need to put you in contact with that were other guests, even on other episodes with Rising Tide and others in the network here. But just thank you again for just taking time as we wrap up the week and just really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Andreas, thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.